How does Putin do it? It seems a simple question, and a lot of the answer lies in the control that Putin has over televisions, over media, in Russia itself. And that is where a lot of the real money is being spent. Because, I mean, Putin could easily spend more money on his air force and simply bombard the remaining ports around Ukraine and trap the Ukrainians. But that's not his aim. I mean, the Ukrainians at the moment only have about 300 planes. And even when the F-16s arrive, they're going to be old F-16s. They will give Ukraine an edge, but perhaps not much of an edge. But I think Putin's aim is not that. Putin's aim is to continue to look good for as long as possible in front of his own people, a little bit like Netanyahu looking good in front of his own people and hanging on to power by virtue of being a warlord. That's the aim. I thought initially that the aim of Putin was to conquer Ukraine and get Zelensky out and ensure that the Minsk agreement remained intact. I thought that was the original plan, and it may have been. Putin certainly had plans to go in quickly, 3 days later, proclaim success. But once that failed, Putin, I think, revised his plans, particularly with the negative feedback that he got from the rest of the world. And now, in order to survive, Putin has to continue fighting. In order to survive, Netanyahu has to continue fighting. This has to be a permanent state of war. And the rumors which are running around that Putin and Zelensky might well be about to meet, I think are nonsensical. That's not going to happen. It's not because Zelensky will not tolerate a peace deal. It's not even because 70% of the Ukrainian population would not surrender land for peace. It's because I don't think Putin would be prepared to capitulate. Now, various events have occurred in the last few days. One of them is the false flag attack on one of these Brezhnev apartments. There's particular apartments around Russia, particularly in Moscow, I discovered, were all built according to a particular formula. One formula, which is 10 floors high, it's one of the smaller prototypes, is the Brezhnev apartment block, and I think that's only got one lift going up the centre. Later versions had 2 lifts and more floors. And in Novgorod, in Belgorod, one of these apartment blocks was attacked and fell down, and during the rescue operation, the top part of the apartment block that joined the apartment block to the 2 neighbouring blocks suddenly exploded and caved in, killing, or at least trapping, quite a lot of the people involved in the rescue operation. So it was a deadly false flag operation, assuming it was a false flag operation. Why do people assume it was a false flag operation? I'm not alone in this, by the way. It's because first of all, the explosion came from beneath, and the explosion came from the eastern side of the tower block. If this was a drone from Ukraine, it would come from the western side, from the southwestern side. It came from the wrong side. So it would remind anybody watching this, it would remind Russians, but of course they aren't going to be given this information, of 1990 when Putin blew up apartment blocks with what the FSB described as bags of sugar when one bag didn't explode. And the Kharkiv advance is justified by the Belgorod apartment building explosion. And it's also, I think, a demonstration that life can go on in the extended special military operation under Belousov, who of course has replaced Shoigu. Shoigu, the favorite of Putin, the fellow who was caught salmon fishing with Putin, the longest serving cabinet minister. And so in all ways, I think this is about a message. It's not so much about taking territory. And how can 30,000 troops expect to take the second largest city in Ukraine, which even now there are still 7,000 people living there. Yes, a lot have been evacuated, but there's still 7,000 there. And this is going to take a long time. Some people say it will fall, some people say it won't fall. Some people look upon this as the new Avdiivka or the new Bucha, but it's 30 miles from the border. And Putin only had about 50,000 troops available. 20,000 seem to have stayed behind, 30,000 have moved on, and 1,750 died yesterday or the day before. This is an enormous number of people that Putin is prepared to throw into the meat grinder simply to prove a point, because Putin is more interested in keeping his point active, in keeping this war active, in keeping his authority than he is in saving lives and really acquiring territory. I say Russia has the superior air force to now completely surround Ukraine. It could do it. And presumably it could also rely on these other engagements, these other powers, Iran, North Korea, Afghanistan, and indeed the distractions, because you've got the distractions of Afghanistan, you've got the distractions of Hamas. I don't believe that the Hamas attack had nothing to do with Putin. It coincided with Putin's birthday. Putin's had there's been many times when Putin's birthday has been celebrated with a mishap or an assassination, like, for example, the assassination of the journalist in 2006. Like indeed the photograph of Putin and Shoigu fishing for salmon all those years back. So there's plenty of reasons why I think Putin wants to keep this alive and not necessarily at the moment succeed. He wants to demoralize Ukraine. He wants to demoralize the West. He wants to destroy the Western support. This is a war of attrition, but it's a war about the power of Putin, or rather the faction that goes under the name of Putin in the Kremlin. And he's taking advantage, of course, of the lull before the 61 billion aid package finally arrives to build up the defenses of the Ukrainians. Will that help? Well, it will help things linger on a little bit more. Will it be enough? Putin's making one or two big mistakes. One mistake is he believes that the constant barrage against civilians will break Ukrainian morale. But of course, what he's failed to do is look back on the effect of the London Blitz on British morale. That actually boosted morale here. And the other thing he does is to constantly carp on about the Azov battalion and the mistakes of particular Ukrainian troops. I'm sure there are mistakes. I'm sure there are atrocities. I'm sure there are war crimes. But the breaches of international law, the minor breaches, or the breaches, not minor, they are major. When somebody dies, they are major. But the fewer breaches of international law by the side which is being attacked does not exonerate the other side, the attacker. The same thing can be said about Israel and Hamas. The fact that Israel is certainly guilty of breaching international law in specific instances does not exonerate the terror of Hamas. or, or as indeed it doesn't exonerate the invasion of Putin. War brings out the very worst in all people. That's why it's essential that we move as fast as possible into talking. But at the same time, a nation which has been invaded has a right to defend itself. And a civilized society has a duty to support those countries that are invaded or terrorized. Now, how that country which is invaded then responds, that's a different matter. I happen to think that Israel has responded wrongly. I happen to think that Ukraine has responded rightly. I also, unfortunately, think that Ukraine at the moment looks very unsure, while Israel looks much more certain of success. So you've got to weigh and judge these various things, and it's all about nuance. I've been warned a few times by people making comments that our present YouTube society doesn't tolerate nuance. Well, it needs to grow up. And it's not impossible that bad people will do good things. It's not impossible that good people will do bad things. And we need to call them out. And we need to call out these false flag and these dodgy doings, whether these are the bombings of warehouses in London, Ukraine, Bulgaria. They are connected. The spy system, like some sort of enormous fungal growth, like some sort of mushroom infestation, is true. It's true. And they're all over the place. And they're loitering on the internet. Does this mean we should be quiet? Does this mean we shouldn't answer? Of course we should answer. Of course we should talk. And the idea that I don't listen to this and I don't look at that because I don't like what is being said is nonsensical. It's not going to stop being said, is it, because I don't look at it? No. We should look at everything. We should assess everything. And the fact that we watch something doesn't mean that we endorse it, does it? It simply means we are aware of what's going on. And to be aware of the movements, the desperate movements of troops from Russia into Ukraine is an important fact in today's world, because Putin does not care about life. He doesn't care about life on his own side. He doesn't care about life on the Ukrainian side. And the same thing can be said about Hamas. Hamas doesn't care about life in Israel, and it doesn't care about life in Palestine. And that puts those two on a sort of parity. And that's a good benchmark. That is evil. When people do not care about life, that is evil.